Let's move on to North Carolina's second transfer portal edition as we sit here when we're recording this. Cade Tyson, shooter, predominantly 3-4-4-3 from Belmont. A lot of folks, and I don't know where you stand on it, so we'll ask that too. A lot of folks kind of rated him as one of the, if not best shooter, just pure shooter availables in the portal. Shooters available in the portal, excuse me. So I want to ask you, what's your first impression of seeing Cade Tyson as he's coming from Belmont and moving up in competition at least to the ACC next year?
Well, I thought one of the things that was glaring, the most glaring thing was just the analytics on him. I mean, as I look down here, like 60% on unguarded jumpers per synergy, that's 99th percentile. So right off the bat, you have someone who's going to excel at spacing the floor and creating room for other people to make plays. He's going to have to be guarded whether he's on one or not. You know what I mean? If he's made 3 or 4 threes in a row, that's one thing, but guess what? The defense isn't helping off him either way. He's going to be a heck of a decoy either way. So it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. It's like he doesn't necessarily have to be the guy to have a huge role within this offense because of the amount of gravity he has. That's become a popular term as of late, just meaning how close the defenders have to stay to you. And they really are going to have to stick to this kid. He's also an efficient shot maker. This is also something that I think is interesting. Like when you dig into the types of shots he makes in his shot profile, like he can make pick and pop threes. He can make spot up shots. He can also shoot off the dribble. He also goes into the mid range a little bit. He can shoot off handoffs. So you dig into his film, you dig into his numbers, and you see a really efficient shooter who is among the absolute best in the college game in terms of making open shots, but then has some versatility in terms of the types of tough shots he can make. I think that there's some potential to like attack closeouts and stuff like that. He's not going to be a primary creator, but the reality is he could play at a very high level for a long time without ever having to be a long-term creator off the dribble. One of the things that I think is interesting is typically there is an inverse relationship between shooting and length, especially when the younger you are, the more true that statement is. Meaning like the guys who have longer arms usually aren't great shooters. And I have not seen verifiable, shall we say, measurements on Tyson. But when I look at him, he looks long to me. And one of the things I learned pretty early on, when you start to get the reliable measurements, you learn that the guys who look long sometimes aren't. Sometimes it's like they have narrow shoulders, so it's almost an optical illusion where their arms look longer than they are. And then you see the measurements, you're like, this guy's not long at all. Whereas the guys who have the broader shoulders, they measure out longer. And so he looks long to me, and that is rare to have somebody who has length and has shooting splits at this age. So that's really a unique overlap on the Venn diagram, if you will. Which I think is maybe the most intriguing part about him.
So I think everybody knows that going from Belmont in that conference to the ACC is going to be harder. But like,
sure.
Can you explain to us from a scouting perspective of why that is, what makes it tougher, and why it's going to be a little more difficult to shoot 46 and something % from three?
Yeah, the size, the pace, the physicality, like all that. Now on the it all ticks up. I mean, it's the game's going to be faster. There's less space on the floor because the bodies are bigger. The level of contact on each play becomes more. Thus, the fouls. You have to play through that much more because there's like a however you want to say it. There's like a certain minimum amount of contact which is acceptable to the officials, and when it's just generally higher on every play, it becomes higher. What is allowed by the officials becomes higher. So I think all that is going to be an adjustment. But what could be different is the fact that, his overall usage at Belmont, he's going to be a guy, certainly if he went back, he would have been the extreme focal point. In North Carolina, I'm not sure that's going to be the case. As I said earlier, this guy could be your fourth option and could be a phenomenal fourth option because of the gravity he has off the ball, because of the attention that opposing defenses are going to have. It's one thing spacing the floor, but you put him in any type of screening action, whether he's coming off a stagger, he's coming off a back screen, and you've got not only his man who's got to account for him, but the screener's man who has to help on him too. And that just creates all kinds of opportunities to slip screens, to create cutters, to not be able to hedge on ball screens, not be able to show on ball screens, and all that stuff that Hubert Davis gets to play with. That's just going to be a little bit of a potential new wrinkle. So I think there are challenges that go along with it, but there are some benefits too, in terms of like being the fourth name on the opposing scouting report as opposed to the first or second.
I know this isn't. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I know this isn't. It's hard to create an average, but like from a scale of like Dalton Connect, who's perfect, from day one, and maybe somebody else, like how fast is the usual transition from a lower level to an upper tier level like the ACC or the SEC or the Big Ten?
Well, this is the thing. Like, we talk about the Dalton Connect stories, but they're the exceptions. They're not the rules. You know what I mean? Like, how many high volume mid-major guys went to high major programs and then just weren't able to produce at the same level? There were a lot, but those stories aren't nearly as noteworthy. It's like when I'm talking about the NBA draft a lot of times right now, I was like, listen, we're talking a lot more about Jason Tatum than we are Josh Jackson. Even though Jason Tatum went third in the draft, Josh Jackson went fourth. And a lot of people on draft night thought Josh Jackson was better, because we tell the success stories. We don't tell the ones that don't work out. And there are a lot of these transfers that don't work out. But I think a lot of that is more often than not when they are being asked to step into a featured role at a higher level. Like, just to be clear, like Dalton Connect, Tennessee wasn't expecting that from Dalton Connect. And, like the NIL numbers aren't public and stuff like that, but reportedly, like behind the scenes, it's not like he had the biggest NIL on the team last year from what everybody said. So I think he surprised everyone. And so I just don't think like that's a fair expectation to put on anyone. I think that when you see guys who can go be a featured mid-major player or step up and become a hugely valuable third or fourth option, I think that's what's maybe a better comparison here. I don't have any great ones off the top of my head, but like Dalton Connect, I don't know that college basketball will have another Dalton Connect this year in terms of being able to handle the same volume at a higher level for a team that's competing at the highest level in the country. I just don't think. I think that's the exception and not the rule.